morning, afternoon, or whatever time it is, depending on where you live. I am MJ Shores. I'm with Personal MBA Coach. We provide MBA admissions consulting to prospective applicants from around the world. We have done so since 2008. Our founder is Scott Edinburgh, who has an undergraduate degree from MIT and earned his MBA from Wharton, the Wharton School of Business. And our clients have a 96% placement rate at the top schools of their choice. I would like to introduce all of you to our two wonderful students who are here to talk about the difference in US schools versus European and what education is like over here. The first one is Melissa. Melissa, would you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background, why you chose an MBA, and any little tidbits you have for people before we get started.
Of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa. I'm from Turkey originally. I was working in oil and gas as a chemical engineer before business school, and realizing that I don't have the business acumen I need to actually understand end-to-end any industry from end to end, let alone oil and gas. I decided that it's the best time to do my MBA before I get too deep into my career. My high school experience sort of resonated with what Tugs brings to the table, from small community to very family-like environment at a very remote location. That was a very transformative experience for me. I wanted to relive my high school dream. So here I am at Tuck. I would love to answer all and any questions you may have.
Thank you. And Chris, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I was born and raised in Germany. My background is container shipping, so very logistics focused, kind of not the very traditional background for an MBA. I went to Sloan, or to the US in general, because it's a 2-year program, so I felt like I had a better chance of kind of integrating in the wider university, learning more about my classmates in the country. And then when it comes to Sloan, I really like the practical focus, so being able to have a couple of different labs, working with companies and peers on projects, as well as the integration in a wider university and being able to kind of cross-register some classes at other parts of the faculty. So that was my reason to head to Sloan.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. I'm sure we will be getting some questions in from everybody. Actually, looks like we have a couple already. So Melissa, how did you decide on which schools you wanted to apply? And did you consider schools in Europe and the US, or what was your decision-making criteria?
So I'm probably one of the oddballs here. During my application, I only applied to Tuck. But before that, when I was business school browsing, I did all my homework from European schools to US schools and looked into the program details, from whether they offer a major to how long is the program to the class size and different clubs and activities that you can immerse yourself into, along with the global exposure and experiential learning. I'm pretty sure all of us, when we are going through our choices of which schools to attend or which schools to even apply, we consider a variety of different options. What stuck out the most for me was, one, the class size. I do appreciate a smaller community where I feel like learn and get to know people in more and deeper level. And coming from an engineering background, I knew I needed the basics. So a strong core curriculum was another top choice for me. And Tuck had both those top 2 priorities of mine in place. So I decided to only apply to Tuck after a long process. I think it took me about 2 years to decide which school to apply. But I loved my job, so I was not in a rush.
Okay. Chris, where did you study for your baccalaureate degree?
I studied in Hamburg, which was also the city I grew up in, so that was close to home.
Okay.
And then heading outside my comfort zone was one of the reasons why I didn't want to do an MBA in Germany in particular. So I did apply to one other school in the UK, which was also pretty interesting. But Sloan has always been my dream school, and I have been pretty lucky to work alongside some alumni who only strengthened my motivation to go to Sloan in particular. So those were the only two schools I applied to.
So tell me this, Chris. Having come from a background where you went to college at a European institution where the educational approach can be very different, right? I taught in Russia for 2 years. Their teaching pedagogy is vastly different than in the US. What kinds of differences have you noticed between how you studied in Germany versus how you study at Sloan now in the US? And were there any surprises or any tips that you would give to prospective Europeans wanting to come to the US?
I'd say one thing I definitely noticed here in the US in terms of the class is it's super international, which is very positive. So you get a lot of different perspectives, not only from your students, but also from the faculty. So I think that's one difference, that back home in Germany, you might have a couple of members of the faculty who are international. But here in the US, I feel like the diversity is just much greater. So you'll get a lot of interesting perspectives from people who taught at different institutions, different countries. And then when it comes to the curriculum, MIT definitely makes sure that it isn't the, oh yeah, it's business school, everything is easy. So that's definitely not the case. So I feel like it's pretty fast paced and academically quite challenging. Although I have to admit that it's somewhat difficult to compare it to my undergrad experience, with everything being like semi-virtual and COVID. So I feel like that definitely throws a wrench into everything that's going on. But like, it's definitely fast-paced. You'll do a lot of reading, quite a few case studies. So I think back home in Germany, we just picked up on using case studies. It's quite common here. A lot of discussions. So yeah, pretty interesting, but definitely don't be scared.
Great advice. So Melissa, what are some of the most useful things you believe that you're getting out of the MBA program?
Along with the hard skills and the business acumen that everybody like raves about, I think the soft skills and time management probably are the two biggest things that I'm going to be leaving like Tuck with. Number one thing that we were thrown into was variety of different classes, variety of different homeworks and different readings, and being able to shuffle that with recruiting just when we walked into the school. So you not knowing how to deal with 20 running priorities at the same time teaches you to get more creative with your time, to get more decisive about what you value the most. So it teaches you not only time management, but prioritization, to the point that you know what is important for you and for your company at the job. As someone who ended up getting an internship done over the summer, I'm a second-year student, than I probably would have ever imagined. Besides that, soft skills, definitely. We are in an environment where we have to present quite often, not only in front of our classmates, but in front of faculty, in front of visiting executives. And that pushes us out of our comfort zone. And we have to like not only pick up different skill sets, but also be able to resonate with the people that we are speaking to.
Wonderful. How about you, Chris? What do you think are some of the most valuable things that you've been getting out of an MBA?
I'd actually echo pretty much everything Melissa said. So I feel like it's definitely soft skills, time management. Yeah, I mean, I'm a first year, so I don't have as much experience as she does, but time management is definitely very high on the list of things you learn very early on, because your schedule is basically always full. I think I haven't had a day where I haven't been double booked with something. So like, you definitely have to make priorities and be very diligent in terms of like following up on things and keeping an overview of what's going on.
Ah, yes, time management. I hear many, many MBAs say that's probably maybe number one of the things that they learn in an MBA. Well, maybe not number one, but it's pretty high up there, which is never a bad thing. So there is no shortage of advice that people give prospective MBA applicants out there, right? And I'm sure as you applied, you heard all kinds of things, some that were true and some that were probably far off the mark. Chris, what kind of advice would you give to anybody applying to an MBA program based on your experience?
I'd say it sounds very generic saying that, but like make sure you only apply to schools you're really interested in. So what I heard from Melissa and also my own experience, we both applied to one, or in my case, two schools. So when it's about doing research, like look into as many universities as you're interested in, figure out what the program is actually focusing in, figure out what the alumni are doing, try to talk to people who've been to the place. But when it comes to actual applications, try to narrow it down to a reasonable number of schools you're actually interested in, because I feel like everything is going to be much more genuine when it comes to your essays, your interviews. I think everything is going to be much more natural for you, as opposed to applying to whatever 12 different schools and having people notice that they might just be a backup school in the process.
So, Chris, let's say somebody isn't that familiar with MBA programs. How would they figure out which ones are of interest to them?
That's a good question, actually, because there's so much information on the internet, and of course, every school is gonna hit on some of the most important points. So every school is gonna say they're international. Every school is gonna say they prepare you very well for the workplace. Every school is gonna say they have a very practical focus. I think speaking to people is definitely helpful. And as, for example, like LinkedIn outreach, you might not get a response from everybody, but in general, I felt like people are pretty happy to talk about their experiences at business school. And then there are a lot of platforms. I mean, GMAT Club is definitely one of them, where you can try to learn the different nuances between schools and actually try to understand like what is each school focusing on and what is maybe something that aren't really focusing on that much, so you can decide for yourself like what is the right place for me.
Wonderful. That's very helpful. Melissa, can you tell us a little bit about, like, you said earlier that you were happy with your job, so you were in no rush to get an MBA. What led you to the point where you said, all right, now I'm ready, and here's why I want an MBA? You alluded to it earlier, but tell us about the journey to how you got to that point.
Sure. So for my let me tell you a little bit more about my career journey, I guess. And my pivot point was very clear when I reached there. So I did undergrad and went to school for chemical engineering, and I was pretty interested in oil and gas industry and wanted to learn the supply chain from end to end. However, I was in the US for my undergrad, but as an international, I couldn't start working at a refinery. So I said, I will start from the retail side of the business. I worked for a wholesale gas distribution company here for about 2 years and did project management there. So I said, okay, now it's time for me to learn about the production side of the business. So I have a complete picture of the industry. When I did that for 2.5 years in Turkey, and I found out that my industry knowledge is at a level that I can not only switch learning the business as a whole, then being very focused about the technical side of the business. I think it was just like a personal realization of that I am feeling good about where I stand in terms of my career, but I don't want to continue maybe focusing on one aspect of a business or like one part of or one function within a big corporation, but understand not only the company as a whole, but the industry, how the markets work, how what happens in US affects my country, or vice versa. in a different scale. Having these questions and not having the answers, it was clear to me that I need additional knowledge and additional education and additional exposure to different things that I haven't been before. That's how I made the decision to get into business school.
Great. Well, it's very thoughtful and insightful way to get to that. So I applaud you. It's a lot of hard work kind of grasping with those issues, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But also, it's nothing wrong with just being bored of your job or bored of what you do every day and want a peace of mind, or like want to change. Or there's nothing wrong with being adventurous. Like if you are where you are and you are feeling too comfortable and you don't want to do that anymore, you want a little bit of challenge, then MBA is a good place for you too. Like you don't really have to go through the steps that I've been through to just decide it's a good path for you. MBA people, there's so many different classmates of ours. They're coming from so many backgrounds. It's like mesmerizing how many different people that you can meet.
Mesmerizing. Wow, that's a great adjective. So all of you prospects out there, be mesmerized. Go get your MBA. So Chris, what are your career goals? Do you plan on working in the US for a period of time, or are you looking to go back to Europe? And for people either from the US or Europe wanting to go the reverse route, what kinds of opportunities are there coming out of a place like Sloan, or what you see coming out of other MBA programs?
So personally, I'd like to stay in the US for a couple of years, just because I feel like having the change of scenery and making connections here with the school, but also with some of the alumni, I feel like staying in the US for a couple of years, I'd be able to leverage that more than if I go back to Europe immediately. And in terms of opportunities for the US specifically, due to more and more MBA programs opting to become STEM certified, as an international student, that allows you to work up to 3 years after graduation in the States, which gives you much more time to potentially get an H-1B visa, which then allows you to work in the country for a little longer. So of course, there are a little more legal hurdles to overcome as an international working in the US, as opposed to going back to your home country. But I feel like it's a risk worth taking for the reward of just basically having one of the biggest markets and economies available to you. When it comes to maybe going back to Europe, I think most larger US business schools have a brand that is fairly popular in Europe nowadays as well, just because there's so much exchange between the two markets that most people are aware of either side's programs. And then maybe for people from the US heading to Europe, it's definitely a super interesting market. I think for most people, the UK is the natural starting point because of cultural and linguistic similarities. But what I also would encourage people to do is that also have a look at Spain, France, Turkey, Germany, because most large corporations nowadays work, I'd say 80% speaking English. So language isn't the barrier it used to be in my perspective.
Okay. So coming to the US, Chris, were there what surprised you the most, either at school or about living over here? What was a big surprise?
Good question. It's super international. So that is something I was a little scared of upfront with everything going on. I was thinking, oh, maybe my class is made up of people who have all pretty much the same background, the same set of experiences, but that's luckily definitely not the case. And something which surprised me about Cambridge in particular is just how close the interaction is between companies and the schools. Because there's a cluster, for example, speaking of MIT in particular, of biotech and pharmaceutical firms right around the campus who do a lot of research with the company, with the university. So there's a lot of integration, a lot of exchange of ideas, which makes it pretty interesting, which I think is not as strongly developed back in Europe.
Wonderful. Okay, Melissa, I have to ask you the same question. What's been the biggest surprise for you? I mean, I know you're originally from Turkey, but I know you've been in the US for some time. What has been the biggest surprise for you going into your MBA program?
Definitely diversity. I know I'm going to be echoing Chris on that one, but people who not diverse as in like different nationalities, backgrounds, the people's ambitions, expectations out of MBA, or like their journey, that directed them coming into MBA. It is just mesmerizing. It is immensely impactful because it not only helps with your personal journey, but it also teaches you like different combinations of things that are out there that lead people to same destination. So like, not only classes and professors, yes, we are in touch with our academics quite heavily as well, but I think people's journey and what they bring to the table, their perspective, is what makes like each and every school probably unique. It's in its own their way.
Okay. So Chris, if Melissa describes her MBA experience as mesmerizing, how would you describe yours?
I'd say exciting. It's maybe not as big of a word, but it has been amazing so far. So, I mean, it's always happening. Like for me, my whole experience has been under the shadow of COVID. So going into everything, I was very concerned of how are they going to do classes? Am I going to meet any of the classmates? Am I basically just going to sit the entire day at home looking at a screen? But the university has done a pretty good job of creating a hybrid model, actually allowing us class time, facilitating ways to meet classmates in a safe environment. So I'm super happy and just amazed by how class has been so far, and also again echoing Melissa, the people is I think who made the experience especially great. So
wonderful. So we have somebody here who says the title of the video says Tuck and Rotman, but they're students from Tuck and Sloan. Do either of you know much about Rotman that you could share with this person?
Unfortunately, not too much. I know it's based in Toronto, and I think one of the strongest Canadian schools. And from what I heard, it places quite well into finance and consulting, especially in the Canadian market. But to be fair, I probably won't know much more than the information that's out there on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I was actually on a panel earlier this morning with an admissions person or a representative of the school at Rotman. It is very international. It's very global. It's very strong academically, and it's highly respected, and it's a wonderful school. Well, someone is asking which college you are going to, Melissa. Show him your sweatshirt. Must have missed our introduction. She goes to Dartmouth Tuck. And next question from the same person is, what are the job opportunities still available under COVID-19? I'd love to hear each of you weigh in based on what you know from career management. And what I can tell you from what I see going on is there are certain industries that are booming. You do anything related to, and Chris, you can speak to this, logistics, manufacturing. There's a number of there's a lot of manufacturing being brought back into the US. If you work in the field of medicine, medical devices, medical research, anything to do with food and distribution in those areas is doing well. And there are some other areas that are beginning to come back now that we're figuring out how to reopen safely. But from the perspective of what you see going on at your schools and with your classmates, and I know, Melissa, you're a second year, what do you see going on?
Sure. So let me start. So honestly, since being a second year student, I've gotten to see the recruiting from both virtual and in person side of things, and I must admit that besides sitting in front of your computer and joining everything over Zoom, there's nothing much that has changed. Companies are still eager, and some of them are probably a lot more eager than they were before to hire MBAs more than ever because like when you're thinking about business school, like there are four general like buckets that people kind of walk into business school thinking with their mindset on at least one being general management, second being consulting, investment banking, or tech. So these are the probably the 80 to 90% of your classmates. Any business school is going to be interested in one of these four categories, especially under these four. I don't see any changes in going to negative, but I think tech is blooming, consulting is blooming, banking and general management are hiring as many as they were last year, maybe even some more. But because this change has hit us too hard, we have to try our best to go back to normal as fast as possible. And big companies or small companies are aware of that. So they need a lot more focused expertise or a different level of education more than ever. So MBA is very, very popular these days.
Thank you. That's very reassuring because there's a lot of mixed messaging out there, a lot of misinformation. So we heard it directly from somebody who's in the thick of looking for a job. So, Chris, I see you nodding a bit at what Melissa's been sharing. What is your perspective from what you're hearing from your classmates?
Fairly similar, actually. So even though as a first year, I'm still in the recruitment process for an internship, so I haven't spoken to companies about full-time offers. What I'm hearing is very similar to what Melissa mentioned, is that it's basically the same range of companies still recruiting at the big MBA programs. Some of them actually even more than pre-COVID. So what I understood is that some of the consulting firms actually hired even more people than pre-crisis. And I think for many industries, there are going to be some changes due to COVID and potentially trying to make supply chains more stable, production facilities more diverse. So I think there are a lot of challenges that companies are facing. And what I understood is that many of them are actually looking to bring in new talent to tackle those challenges. And what Melissa also touched upon is how fast tech has been growing throughout the crisis. So some of the big tech firms actually were very frequent visitors at some of the career sessions and basically trying to bring people on board for different career pathways just because they have a large need for talent, apparently, also still in COVID.
I can jump in really quick for a quick example. I spent my summer at Amazon over the summer, and I know like how my process went by. And our recruiting, I believe, started late in the winter term. For big tech, usually that's when the majority of the internship applications are out. So this year, I'm seeing the shift to even go to earlier in the year because they're super eager to finalize their internship, because I'm assuming that the class of interns are going to be bigger than they were last year.
Oh, wow. So you mentioned internships. So obviously the advantage of going to a 2-year program is that between your first, second years, you can do internships. What was the value of that to you, Melissa? And can you tell us a little bit about the internship you had, what the options were to you, available to you, and how would you describe that experience?
Coming from engineering and oil and gas, I'm definitely one of the non-traditional backgrounds who are at the business school to change their career paths. I'm not saying you cannot go back to oil and gas after business school. There are people who are doing that. I just wanted a different experience for myself post graduation. So I focused on tech because portion of my experience was related with innovation during my previous experience, and I thought that would enable me to like be in a more autonomous, fast-paced environment. I was not mistaken, so I had a great time at Amazon over the summer. I worked at AWS as a senior program manager and worked at their strategic programs and initiatives team, working specifically for executive engagement, something that I've never done before. So that exposure of a mini life snippet from somebody's post MBA life gives you an opportunity to see whether that is something that is for you. Because there are so many people come to business school saying they want to do consulting, they want to do investment banking or tech. They walk into these experiences and end up realizing that it is not for them at all. So that trial and error happens before you graduate, so you don't have to wait some time post graduation to figure out what is good for you, what is not. So I think it's a good buffer time if you were to be a 2-year student, a 2-year program member.
That's great. One of the reasons people come to MBA programs is to expand their cross-cultural sensitivity, their ability to deal with other cultures, knowing that, like, for example, we all negotiate differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, what kinds of opportunities are there at your school or any school in general as part of the MBA degree to learn leadership skills that would work across cultures? And what have you learned about, like, maybe negotiating in the US versus Germany or other parts of Europe or Asia?
I think there are a range of opportunities. So on the one hand, there are many instances in the curriculum where those skills are fostered. So there are opportunities to negotiate, or there are cases where people take on different roles and have misaligned goals, and basically are forced into a conflict where they have to mitigate a certain problem. They have different incentives, and they have to come up with some sort of compromise. And since you're doing that in your class environment, just by the sake of the class being very diverse, you're going to have people from different countries, different backgrounds, different genders, with whom you have to interact. And there are a lot of things outside class. So clubs, conferences, all those things where people can take on leadership roles in terms of organizing that. And there are going to be situations when you have to convince someone to be a sponsor for a conference, or when you want to secure a speaker, where you try to have convince them, shine the best light on whatever you're trying to sell them. And differences between Germany and the US, I noticed that people in the US are a little more polite and not as direct as back home. So I noticed that I have to sometimes dial down what I'm saying, or be a little more discreet in certain things. And then again, that is like significantly different from some of my classmates in Asia, where being respectful with one another is very important. And something I also learned at business school is that just because someone is from a given geography, that doesn't necessarily mean that their comfort level or their negotiation style fits the typical stereotype for that region. So I think that's also something you'll learn, is that just because someone is from country A, they might not fit the bill. So you might have someone who's from Japan but is super outgoing and very confident, and you might have someone from the Netherlands who is a little more shy and not as confrontative. So I think that's something you'll realize as well during B school.
Yeah, those are some great insights, especially the last point that you made, that people don't always operate according to the norms of their own culture. So, but that's great. Well, what do you have to share with us in this regard, Melissa?
Chris touched on great points in terms of curriculum and clubs. you definitely get a good array of different opportunities. I guess one thing I would add to that would be the leadership development opportunities that we have outside of the clubs and curriculum aspect. We do have a mentorship system through our different centers or through school directly, as individuals who would like to work on different aspects of their leadership styles or become more of an ideal leader to their vision, are paired with mentors from different areas. And you go through a series of sessions where you not only resonate more like talk as if you're journaling with one another and set goals for what you want to accomplish before graduating. So that those are some of the good experiential opportunities that we have. I'm pretty sure every school has it. So
Wonderful. If you were to think back about your whole process, applying to an MBA and then coming into an MBA, if you were to do it all over again, is there one piece of advice you might give to prospective applicants that might make their journey a little easier? Chris.
I think for me it was the GMAT part. Just because I was traveling for work quite a bit, and I always started preparing, and then I had a project somewhere at the opposite end of the world. Didn't do anything in that regard for 4 weeks. Came back, basically had to start from zero. Studied for 3 or 4 weeks, stopped again, and somewhat similar about school research. So it was a lot of interruptions in that process. And I think something which would save me time, or which I would advise prospective applicants to do, is if you're keen on doing an MBA, make sure, like, if you research, if you study for the GMAT, basically about your application in general, stick to it and don't start, stop. That's going to cost you a lot of time and make the whole process less efficient.
Great. How about you, Melissa?
that's a perfect insight. I totally did that myself as well. That just elongates your time before you get to apply, and it's unnecessary amount of pain that you had to go through too. So mine would be two things, and it's probably going to come across as very cliche, but one, be yourself. You never know how much being yourself can get to places, because if it's a natural fit between you and the school, that's just gonna be all over your face, all over your communications, and you're not gonna require to per se fake it to make it to a MBA class. And second thing, I would definitely say is like invest in the schools that you're applying to. Take your time, do your research, do your homework, and make sure if it is a good place for you to spend the next 2 years of your life. It's a big investment, not only for your time and energy, but only for the life you're leaving behind. So to make sure that you just want to be there, and not just because you got lucky and you got in.
Okay, one final question is, now that we've talked about why you decided to get an MBA, why you chose the schools you did, what the benefits are to you of the schools in terms of your knowledge, your ability to negotiate, get a job, learn to lead. What about financing and paying for it, Melissa? What can you tell people about financial aid? Anything that can help them figuring out how to fund a degree? What is the ROI on it? Any guidance that people would benefit from?
Definitely. So I'm a little bad in the financial matters of making sure the ROI that works. I guess I just walked into the business school trusting the system and trusting the process that it will work. But I know from the statistics that an average return on investment for MBA is at most 3 years. So by the time you're out, within 3 years, you're almost guaranteed to pay everything that you owe back to school. And as an international, I can just leave a note there. School does have different corporations with and different partnerships with different funding systems that would allow you to take loans without needing a cosigner. I believe majority of the U.S. Schools do allow that. So that is nothing to worry about if you are certain that you want to get an MBA. It's scary at first to take that on that much loan, but everybody does it, and it's a system. It works, and you are almost guaranteed to pay it back within 3 years. So not much of a
Wonderful.
big worry here. Yes.
Thank you. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Along the same lines, it's definitely expensive and it's a scary number. I cannot deny that, but I also think the ROI is definitely there. There are a lot of opportunities to somehow lessen the blow a little bit of financing, whether that is scholarships at the schools or foundations or research institutions. There are a lot of things out there that you can utilize to support in financing a little bit. So it definitely makes sense to research about that a little bit during the application process. Many schools also have opportunities for you to work as a teaching assistant, for example, which again is going to help a little bit about with financing. The internship is paid in pretty much every case, so that is going to help. And then just to be very, very transparent, very frank, as a European, the salary level here in the US for graduates of MBA programs is quite a bit higher than average salaries are in Europe. So even if you pay quite a bit for your tuition and cost of living, the average salary in the US is just significantly higher than back home as well.
Wonderful. So based on all the great things you guys have shared today, I think there are several takeaways that we have. I think the first one is that job opportunities are as good or even better than they've ever been coming out of an MBA. That an MBA is a wonderful opportunity to learn about cross-cultural differences and how to navigate in a world that's increasingly global. And the third thing is that, to your point, Melissa, that you recently made and that you've reinforced, Chris, is that being yourself and even coming from a non-traditional background can be a real asset. And people are always asking how to differentiate themselves, and that's how you do it, right? And I would think, last of all, based on your experiences, an MBA is a mesmerizing and exciting experience. So thank you for your time today. You both have been wonderful, and I think you gave a really deep dive into what it's like to be an MBA student, especially at this rather unusual time in our history. So thank you again, and I wish the best of luck to you and to all of the prospective students out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, indeed.
You're welcome.